Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the Metal Command Show Top Albums of the Year Countdown, albums number 21 through 25. And I had 35 albums that I loved this year, and I'm going to talk about each one of them. I'm doing 5 albums per video, and this is out of the couple hundred releases, demos, and everything else that bands and publicists and labels sent to me. So with that, let's get to number 25 on the list. It is the band Satan, and they are a new wave of British heavy metal band that has been around for a long time. They took a long hiatus, obviously, after the 80s, but Brian Ross, who fronted the first Satan album entitled Court in the Act, came back with the band in 2013 for the album Life Sentence. And of course, you have a couple guys in this band that also play in Skyclad as well, but Brian Ross, of course, many of you know from the band Blitzkrieg, and I did an interview with him back in 2016. I actually got to meet him. They played here in Cleveland. Phenomenal band. And if you like Satan's, all the albums they've ever put out, you'll like this one. The album is entitled Earth Infernal. And the one thing, aside from the songs, I like the fact they still keep a little bit of that old school new wave of British heavy metal sound as far as the production goes. So this is a good album. Satan is one of those bands that is very atypical, you know, when you compare them to other new wave of British heavy metal bands from that era. And definitely they have put out a very, very good album. I'm really digging that album a lot. Before that, or after that, number 24, Lost Society. And this is a band from Finland. The first time I ever heard these guys, they I think it was the album Terror Hungry. Very good stuff. They have a new album that came out this year entitled If the Sky Came Down. They have sort of morphed into this more new metal-ish / thrash metal band with some really catchy melodic choruses. There's a little more singing as far as screaming instead of the more thrash metal vocals and screaming and stuff in the albums. But I like the direction they've taken. Some people haven't, but I actually like it. I like some of the more catchier choruses. And again, you know, the type of music they're doing now is not something I typically get into, but I've really enjoyed the evolution of this band over the course of the albums they have put out. So definitely worthy of being on the list, and it's in at number 24. Number 23. And folks, before I say this, I'm not into a lot of newer power metal, but I definitely like these guys. Mentalist. It is a band from Europe. I heard of this band. Michael LePond, the bassist for Symphony X and Death Dealer, told me about this band he played on a release with in an interview earlier this year. I went and checked out their new album, and it's actually really good. And with power metal being something I'm not into, that should say a lot, because a lot of the newer power metal bands just really don't grab me like some of the older ones did. So this one definitely did. The album is entitled Empire's Falling. I really like it a lot, and it is here at number 23 on the list. Number 22, a band that a lot of people have sort of forgotten about, and it is a thrash metal band that I've loved. In fact, I first heard of these guys years ago. I bought their reissues that came out on the Metal Minded label, who put out a lot of reissues. I think it was like earlier in the decade, or early 2000s, mid 2000s, something like that. I think it was mid 2000s, somewhere around that time. And this is a band called Zentrix, and their new album entitled 7 Words. Now, they are a thrash metal band from the UK. Back in the day, Onslaught and Zentrix were two of the more well-known UK thrash metal bands. You know, thrash metal was really thriving, you know, in the US, you know, with the West Coast thrash metal bands like Metallica, the Bay Area stuff, Metallica, Megadeth, Testament, you know, all those bands, Exodus, and, you know, all of those bands from the West Coast. And then you had your East Coast guys like Anthrax and Overkill, and then you had bands in Europe like Creator and Destruction and Sodom. But UK really wasn't that well known for thrash metal. But Onslaught, which is a band that came back with a vengeance, putting out some amazing stuff. You know, they've been putting out albums for a while now. Zentrix has finally come back. Actually, they came back in 2019 because the 2019 release that they had put out, I liked quite a bit. In fact, the album was entitled Bury the Pain, came out back in 19. I think that Zentrix really has put out an amazing record. The title track, 7 Words, to me is one of the best thrash metal songs I have ever heard, and it is definitely worthy. It's definitely worthy of them. Definitely worthy of them being on the list. So with that said, the next one, and I'm going to say number 21 on this list, is probably one of the greatest comeback albums from any band in existence. And I'll be honest with you folks, they are a band that is very, very good, and it is, to me, probably one of the greatest bands that I used to listen to in the early 90s. So the band is called Skid Row. Remember those guys? They were a band that, you know, they had 18 in Life. You had Sebastian Bach singing in that band back in the day, and they were a band that really should have gone places, but then obviously they had the conflict with Sebastian Bach, and Sebastian Bach, to me, still one of my favorite singers ever, regardless of what the guys at Skid Row might think about him. Definitely one of the best singers I have ever heard. So obviously when he left, they still were putting albums out, but to me, none of the singers they had after him really had that edge on their voice. They had the same songwriters, like in Rachel Bolan and Dave Sabo, and they still wrote pretty good songs, but there was the singer was really the biggest anomaly that was really missing. Now, Johnny Solinger was pretty good, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't Sebastian Bach in my opinion. And I was hoping one day either Bach would rejoin or a different singer possibly would rejoin that band and really kind of give them that edge back. And Eric Gronwald definitely did that. The Gang's All Here by Skid Row is definitely one of the greatest comeback albums I have ever heard. Now, I did like some of their other releases. Like, I liked the album Revolutions Per Minute. Actually, I like that album quite a bit. And I remember when that came out, I really dug the songs. I really liked the album. But this album, The Gang's All Here, is great. Eric Gronwald being in this band is a great thing. I can't wait to hear the next release, because I think the next album after this will probably be a lot better than this one. So definitely in at number 21. And thanks for watching this video. I'll be back in the next video with albums number 16 through 20. So stay tuned.